All right. Hello, my name is Eli Whitaker, and I'm a student in the CIS 325 online section. This is my video demonstration video of the Module 7 assignment, and the purpose is to demonstrate the completion of my React.js project. So if I go into VS Code, first I would like to show how you set up the React project. So if I go to my terminal, let's verify that Node.js and npm are installed. So node b, and that shows that I have node installed, and that will show that I have npm properly installed. Next, there are commands that I use to set up my project. So that would just create a Vite powered React project with the name of my React app. That would change the directory to my React app. Npm install would install the node project manager and all the dependencies. That would obviously have to be ran before I could check verify the installation of npm. And npm run dev would start my development server so that I can go to this, follow the link to show that my React app is properly running. Next, I will talk about the functional components that I created. So the first one that I created is header.jsx. So this line imports React so that I can use that. And the purpose of this entire file is to create a fixed header for my MSU weather tracker application using React. So if you look, or the result that this would be, it would create the fixed header that has a title in the middle and two logos that are positioned on opposite corners. So if you see here, I have my CSS styling for the different parts of my header. So this is all the styling that goes with the header itself. And there is a general logo style, which will be used with this image, which is the source of my logo. And then I had to do slightly different styling for the left logo and right logo to get them positioned in the different corners. And here's my header class that returns the header object. So you can see that the header contains two images of the same source and then a header in the middle that displays MSU weather tracker. And finally, I export the component so I can import it into different files. The second functional component that I created is called weather.jsx. This is my API fetching component. This fetches and displays the data for Murray KY using the Open Weather Map API. So once again, there is importing all the modules needed for this file. This is my API key, which is required to have access to the API. And that I just got from the Open Weather Map website once I signed up for my free trial. There's my API URL that requests the info specifically for Murray KY using the API key. And my fetch weather function, which is my function for fetching the data from the API. At the beginning, you can see that I reset both states so that the data can be fetched again when the button is pressed. That ensures that I have a fresh API call every time. I actually fetch the data using the fetch URL. I check the response status, and then update the state of the set weather use state with the fetch data from the API. The use effects ensures that the weather data is automatically fetched. There's the button style that I use for my button. And then finally, there is a rendering of the actual weather data using the data that I fetched from the API. So I displayed weather, temperature, humidity, and wind speed, which is all stuff that I fetched from the Open Weather Map API. So here is my app.jsx. So I have import header from header.jsx, import weather from weather.jsx, and all of that is made possible by the export statements, which is the last line of each of my code. Now onto my React hooks. My React hooks are in my weather.jsx file. I have 3 different use state hooks, one for the weather, one for loading, and one for error. I chose to use these use states, and they are useful because they make my app reactive, and it's a simple way to store and update values dynamically. So weather stores the fetched weather. It is originally set to null, and then after the API call, I set the weather to the data that I fetched. The loading use state tracks whether data is being fetched. So set loading is set to true whenever I call fetch weather, and then whenever the data is fetched, so set weather is set to data, I set loading to false because loading is over. And then I just use the error use state to handle potential error during use calls. If my code functions like it should and everything goes without issue, errors should never be updated. Now onto my on-click event handler, which is right here. So I say that on the click of a button, I call the fetch weather function again. The button displays the text, refresh weather, and then it is styled using the style that I defined here. And if I go back into my Vite application, I can show that the button refreshes the data on the screen. It calls the API again. And you can also see for a second that the text loading weather data is displayed before the information loads again, and that is just showing the use of the loading use state. Finally, after all this is done, I just have to initialize a Git repository and push it all to GitHub. So if I go back here, I can show my project directory, not that, using the cd command. So there's my project directory. And then this is all of the code that I would run, or all the commands that I would run in the terminal to initialize Git and push it to GitHub. So git init initializes a Git repository. This stages all of the changes for the next commit. The period at the end is symbolic for everything. That command would actually commit all of the changes um, to my remote repository, not my remote, my local repository. And then to do this command, I would have to go into GitHub and get the link to my repository, my remote repository. So I would put that there. And then that would connect my local repository to my remote repository. That command would rename my current branch to main. And finally, that would push all of my code to the remote repository. And then finally, I can go and look at my remote repository. So here's my remote repository on the GitHub website. And as you can see, it has all of the code that I've created for this project. Thank you.